Welcome to the life of a global Desi.
The podcast that connects like minded Desis all over the globe by conforming to stereotypes and breaking them.
Join us both on a journey as we uncover what it means to be a global Desi.
Keep listening.
On to our episode now. Cool. So, what are we talking about today? What's our episode about?
So, I believe this is an episode that's more like your forte. So, the episode is called Bollywood and India, the Eternal Love Saga. And the reason why I say it's your forte is because I do not claim to be like a Bollywood like expert by any means. And I think the little bit of Bollywood just trivia and movies and all the Bollywood gossip that I'm getting into is thanks to you because you're the one who got me into all that. So, yeah, but you are definitely the queen of Bollywood in our house. So I will
Okay,
let you
so
take this on.
Okay, so full disclaimer, guys. Aarti is right. I do really enjoy Bollywood. I do not understand how it is. Like, why though? Because it's like my one guilty pleasure. I feel like personality-wise, I'm, you know, like generally nerdy, like intellectual. I would like to think intellectually
She is, yeah.
curious.
It's
And
like I
my
cannot put
tastes
the
and
two together.
sensibilities yeah, exactly, like my tastes and sensibilities are absolutely opposite what you would think of conventional Bollywood or gossip or whatever. But for some reason this is my guilty pleasure, so I love
And she's
Bollywood,
very,
but
very
I think
guilty of it, by the way.
okay, so let me preface it by saying it's not just Bollywood, right? I think I love cinema. It's broader
Okay.
than that, and over the past few years, I've realized that I've really gravitated more towards learning about like cinema, like what it represents in society, and of course Bollywood in India is a big part of it. But yeah, I do enjoy like understanding how directors, writers, cinematic genius really plays out in how why movies make us feel the way we feel, right? Like we all know the feeling of when we watch a movie and then it makes you think, and it really conveys so much more than just entertainment for me. So I guess that's why I'm interested in cinema in general. So let's not call me a Bollywood freak, but a cinema fanatic. I will also say that I have taken a more keen interest
Okay.
in Bollywood or the Hindi film industry since I've moved out of India. Funnily enough, when you're thrown out of your comfort zone and you're in a more alien environment, you seek cultural familiarity. And I think that's part of what's happening there because I remember when we were in India, it was all about, oh, I'm going to watch Hollywood movies because that's the cool thing to do or consume American pop culture. But when you move out of India, you are trying to find comfort in things back home or trying to understand and learn more about where you come from. And this goes back to what we discussed in our first episode around the idea of identity, right? Who do you identify as? What are your cultural identities? And so I guess that's one of the reasons I've over the past few years also gravitated to understand more about creatives in India and how they shape a society recently.
I guess earlier in the earlier in time you were still pretty crazy about like just coffee with Karan and like Bollywood gossip in general also, but I think now it's evolved to like be a little more
Okay.
intellectual consumption of Bollywood.
Okay, no one's gonna believe that, but
So
fine,
yeah.
if that's how you want to look at it.
What? What do you mean? Of course people are
Yeah,
gonna
and
believe
also I
it.
think like what you're saying
Okay.
is kind of true, and I don't think that's true for like just me because I feel like as a society we are extremely celebrity struck. And again, I'm not generalizing it. I do feel like a majority of people in today's society are super celebrity struck, right? I mean, there's a reason everyone knows Kim Kardashian versus the Nobel Prize winner for physics. I think that's because as a society we look up to fame and money and aspiration. It's a big aspiration, right? And again, it's for a majority of the society. That's why you see the kind of crazy fan following in India for movie stars and celebrity versus people who are, I would say, contributing more responsibly to society, like scientists or you know?
I guess. I mean, also, I feel like these days, even celebrities from mainstream media are also trying their best to contribute responsibly to society. They're speaking up for causes. They do have that influence and they have the voice to be able to do
100%. And
that.
as they
So,
should, right? You should use your, I mean,
yeah.
you would hope that they would use their fame and
Yeah.
influence
In an ideal world.
to doing something positive in society. All right. So, having said all of that, we're jumping into the, I guess we've already jumped into the episode. But as always, I've done some research on just how films have developed and, what are like obviously motion pictures and where did this whole term Bollywood come from? It sounds very similar to Hollywood, and that's absolutely right because it was adopted by the film industry in Bombay. And so when you mix Bombay and Hollywood, you get Bollywood. The first motion picture was ever invented in like the 1888 in France. And then obviously Hollywood, this region in Los Angeles, the Hollywood Hills, is where some of the first like big five movie studios started making motion pictures. You have Walt Disney.
What are the big five?
Yeah, Walt Disney, Paramount,
Okay.
Columbia Pictures, Universal Studios, and Warner Brothers, right? Any Hollywood movie we've ever seen, you've seen these
For the most part.
shots.
Yeah.
I mean, right before the movie starts. So, so I guess like Hollywood was already a pretty well-established film industry, and then in the 1913, I believe, Dada Saab Phalke made the first silent movie in India. It was the first feature film made in India. It was the movie Raja Harish Chandra.
It's like pre-independence even.
Absolutely. It was pre-independence.
Yeah.
Think about the massive population of Indians and think about what that did to the imagination of Indians, right? Like the capturing like the imagination of Indians pre-independence. And by 1930s, the industry was like producing over 200 films per year, and that's insane, right? When you think about what goes into making a movie, that's almost like one movie every couple of days, right? 200 movies.
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah, and now we have like Tollywood and Collywood, which is basically like regional cinema. I'm not familiar with regional cinema from other parts of India, but being South Indian, so Tamil and Telugu movies are often like clubbed together and called like Tollywood. And Collywood, I believe, is for Kannada movies, and then you also have like Malayalam.
Is that called
movies,
Mollywood?
which have like, I think it's
I don't think I've
called
heard that term
Bollywood,
though.
but I didn't do as much research as you did around this, so I can't give you dates. But yeah, I guess Mollywood's a
Possibly.
thing.
I think the Bengal,
I guess I'll have to ask my Malu friends.
yeah.
To, like,
So West
confirm
Bengal
that,
also has
but
a
yeah.
very prolific film industry. I don't think it's called anything.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
like-
Satyajit Ray, Bimal Roy,
It has like such a
some of the most intellectual people from that era. So I think Bengali film is also really prolific, and
Absolutely,
I can't
yeah.
say I've seen too much of it, but you have a lot of.
I've seen
That's
a
awesome.
few. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I definitely need
Yay.
to expand my horizons, which I have to Malayalam movies, which by the way are some of the coolest movies that I've seen
beautiful.
lately. And again,
I agree.
so much to explore there. And Tamil movies. Tamil movies are really,
yeah,
really,
they're
well
well done.
Anyway, so that's a little bit of history about Bollywood, and we'll be primarily talking about Bollywood, unfortunately. But in the future, we'll definitely explore Malayalam and Tamil movies, which I really want to because they're super cool. I think like just going back to what I said earlier about movies capturing the imagination of a whole generation of people or people and society, right? There's this really interesting quote that I often think about by, Fyodor Dostoevsky, who's obviously the Russian novelist who wrote Crime and Punishment, which I've tried to read like multiple times and never been able to. It's like one of those, you must read these 100 books to read before you die, and then you start reading it and then you realize that I'm going to die while reading this book. This is not entertaining or interesting at all. But I guess, you should give me points for trying. So anyway, so he said, at first art imitates life, then life will imitate art, then life will find its very existence from art, right? So when you think about movies and films, we see that films are a mirror of society, and at some point when people start talking about films influencing society and then a society finding its voice and refuge in films, right? So it's a very, I think it's a very like nebulous, very like there's no, it's not cut and dry. It's not that films influence society and that's it, or vice versa. It's a little bit of everything, right? So this quote I thought really captured it, because there are other schools of
Yes.
thought here around art imitates life, but that's not entirely true. There's so much going on. There's so much of like osmosis between these two, right?
Absolutely. I feel like when it comes to Bollywood, though, like for the longest time, people use Bollywood more as a refuge or like an escape from reality. So, in my mind, like we would watch Bollywood movies as, oh, everything's like larger than life, all the dance and all the music, and because how often do we actually break into song and dance in real life, right? And then
Very
also
often,
how
Aarti, I do that all the
they
time.
club.
Just kidding, guys. I'm not
Yeah.
ever bringing into song and dance.
Yeah, but yeah, so like for the most part it's like escape from reality, but I think in recent times cinema is being more influenced by real life events, and you see more movies coming up, like how your Ayushmann Khurrana movies, which are like the small town boy movies, which are becoming all the rage because they are like a piece of reality, right? And they are showcasing reality, or just the idea of having biopics of people, where you're trying to make it as real as possible. It's a biopic and you're capturing a piece of reality, but also talking about pertinent social issues, right? Article 15, again, excellent movie. Or Chapak, which talks about like acid attacks. And so all these movies I feel like are doing just that. That's influencing art, or rather art finding its inspiration from reality. But then again, there are also other movies, I believe, like say what's that? Okay, Kabir Singh. I'm thinking about Kabir Singh, which has been in media for, been actually talked about a lot in media lately, and has gotten a bad rep for the very controversial things that it shows, but also how it's a reflection of this other side of society. I won't say like negative or positive side of society, but this whole other side of society, which is you know either it is actually being captured, or it's capturing that from the society, or it's also
Yeah,
feeding that. It's
perpetuating.
also telling
Yeah.
like the masses that it's okay to do that, and perpetuating these ideas which are now seen as
Yeah.
regressive in a
No, a
lot of
hundred,
ways,
hundred
and
percent,
like
right? I mean, what you said there about just the variety of film that we see nowadays, and it's taken a while for Bollywood or the Indian cinema, Indian film industry to get here, right? There's been a crazy evolution if you think about from the early 2000, early 1900s, right? So you brought up Article 15. The director of that movie, Anubhav Sinha, who's, obviously I'm a great director because I love that movie. He made a very interesting observation where I was just listening to his interview where he said that, this whole idea about societies imitating film or film imitating societies, like the Indian film has had this evolution, right? So when you think about movies in the 30s or 40s, it was more a reflection of like the post-independence search for identity as a nation, right? So filmmakers like Satyajit Ray, Bimal Roy, they focus mostly on like survival, daily miseries of lower class, themes like prostitution, dowry, malpractices in our society. So the movies of that time reflected that time. When you think about 60s, people talk about it as, one of the most like golden age of cinema, and people often quote like movies of Guru Dutt or Raj Kapoor, and how that we kind of like came into coming of age of a nation, because it was like a decade after independence. So it almost sounds like India found its footing in just like being comfortable with who we were. And then you come to like the 70s where things like again kind of like stuff hit the ceiling because things were not good. Like Indian economy wasn't doing well. There was a lot of unrest in I mean, we had the wars, you know, the war with Pakistan, war with China. And so people just wanted to get away from all that misery, right? So like in those times it was more around people didn't want to look at any poverty. There were no beggars in movies. There was, you know, everything was just about looking good or being rich. So you saw a lot of movies of like, I think Rajesh Khanna and Dharmendra and Hema Malini and all these people, and it was more about like what you said in terms of an escape from reality, right? And then the 90s, where you and I grew up, that was the height of liberalization, right? The boom of IT. So we saw tons of
1991,
movies
yeah.
around just this, like the American dream or the dream of like going, like moving out beyond just India, right? And so you saw very aspirational movies around um
Set in foreign
absolutely set in
locations, shot in
Europe.
Zurich and
Yeah,
Switzerland.
every
Yeah.
song sequence kind of just took you to a completely alien foreign location. And the whole school of Karan Johar movies, right, where he every movie of his was
Yup.
set abroad. Like you had no idea this was definitely not India, right? It was like New York.
Yup. There is no Gurukul in India
Definitely,
for
right?
sure.
Like it's somewhere in Europe, and all his movies from like Kuch Kuch Hota Hai to Mohabbatein to like and tons of like this whole slew of movies that he made were about like pulling Indians out of India and really about, hey, look at this
Yup.
uber cool, rich,
Yeah.
Indian diaspora across the world, and so things were super aspirational.
Yeah, in some ways like escapism, right?
Yeah,
Escaping
escaping reality in
reality.
India.
That's what
And that was
really.
like, I would say, most of 90s and most of early 2000s, right? Like pretty much
Yeah.
all of that were movies around, hey, these are like the top brands you should be wearing, these are the kind of houses you should be living in, these are the kind of places you should be holidaying at. And so that's what the movies reflected, because Indians during that time were really venturing out and were really aspirational about what they wanted out of life. And I think
There was also like upward mobility, like in the society, just economically and also socially. And that's what we were doing, was just like globalizing as a society. And that was showing in the movies again, I
100%, like
guess.
globalization really was evident in our movies. And then I think it was really around the time of Swades, when I think this whole idea about like searching for identity, because like we had this whole decade of Indians kind of moving out and feeling like, oh, I'm like on top of the world and really living my best life and living this individual life, where the question came back in the society around, well, who am I? Like what are my contributions to society? And so I think that pretty much started the whole, idea about self actualization, and you're pretty much like going up the Maslow's needs of hierarchy,
Yeah,
right?
and there are like so many of those. I think even Dil Chahta in some ways
Coming
like
of
did
age.
that in terms
Yeah.
of capturing, yeah, coming of age, capturing like a piece of
Yeah.
reality instead of escaping from the reality. And yeah, so you have the Sudesh, then you also have like Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, again like self actualization, which
Yeah.
kind of plays with
Just
that
trying to
idea.
understand like where do you fit in into this world as a person, like what are your ideologies, like just finding this whole idea of like, oh, finding myself, following my passion. So you saw like all these movies where people didn't really have like real occupations, I guess, but it was more around, or they all had like occupations, but no one spoke more or anything about like, oh, your career or your work. It's just, who am I as a person? And now when you think about all the movies, you mentioned Ayushmann Khurrana's movies and this whole idea about just going back to your roots, right? Like as an Indian, all movies nowadays are like, pretty much a lot of movies that are doing well are set in the hinterland, right? The villages of India,
Yeah.
the identity of the common man. Like who is that common man? Like who's that person who's um, in a village or in a two-tier town, all of that. So you see that whole movies, and that's what is the current scenario, I guess. That's we're back to like finding identity in the movies. Part of what we grew up on, like you and I, in the 90s and 2000s, was this whole unfortunate, I wouldn't say unfortunate, but it was growing up, you kind of only have a limited worldview, right? And we grew up
Yeah, and it's shaped by our influences.
100%, right? It's shaped by the movies that we saw, the people around us. And so the movies that we grew up on were pretty much, I guess, Karan Johar School of Film, so kuch kuch hota hai, and
Dil To Pagal Hai, K3G. And like back then, those were our favorite movies. Like DDLJ, Jesus. Like I was in love with Shah Rukh Khan. Still am in a lot of ways. But like I was in love with Shah Rukh Khan all through my childhood. He was like
who
my
wasn't?
absolute favorite. Yeah, I guess who wasn't? There were a few people who weren't. You were either in the Amir Khan, you were either Team Amir Khan or you were either
Yeah, but
Team
like
Shah
Team
Rukh
Shah
Khan.
Rukh Khan
Like
was
one of the
definitely
two.
more, because people in Shah Rukh Khan's camp like didn't really think for themselves. I guess like Amir Khan was always more
It's
intellectual.
all right. That's very interesting because I did find that change come about in myself as well in my like teens and late teens and like early 20s. I was like, yeah, Amir Khan's definitely making more thought-provoking movies and more like movies that appeal to me or like appeal to the person I am versus like big budget commercial movies, right? That Shah Rukh Khan, like, apart from one of Swadesh, and I've seen so many Shah Rukh Khan interviews also where
Chak
he
De.
just hates being asked this question: when are you gonna do a Swadesh or when are you gonna do a Chak De next? And he's like, no, like
I need to
big
make money.
budget commercial movies work for me.
I need to make
Exactly.
my money.
And I love that he's so unapologetic about
Yeah.
it. Like, I'm not questioning Shah Rukh Khan's like intelligence by any means. He's one of the smartest and wittiest person I've seen on interviews, one of the smartest and the wittiest celebs I've seen like on his interviews and stuff. But Shah Rukh Khan, Amir Khan, on the other hand, actually uses his intellect in,
Sure.
experimenting a
Okay,
lot
but now
more
we're
and
digressing to like
playing
personalities.
with it.
So coming back to like Shah Rukh Khan movies, right? The kind of choices he made in the 90s and the
Yes.
2000s around. Okay, I'm gonna be this rich dude who's always like this really wealthy person called Rahul or Raj or some other variation of that, and no one knew what work he did to have all that money. Like no one had a clue.
He was often born into a really rich
Yeah,
family. Like
a
you could tell
businessman,
that his
clearly a
dad
businessman. He's not doing like strategy, who's like or
had like
yeah,
last names like Oberoi
Malhotra.
or so
Yeah, and like
Malhotra.
one of the things I noticed was like a lot of movies in those days were a lot about like North Indians and Punjabis, right? Because think about it, these are the people who were the biggest producers, right? The Yash Chopras, the Karan Johar people, like they were like because they are the producers.
Yeah, but also Bollywood is pretty much like run by the North Indians a lot
Yeah, and like
more.
a few film
I would
families,
say.
right? The Kapoors or like they control all the
Yep.
power, and so that's what the movies reflected. Pretty much that's what you got to see.
Yeah, but I guess like for me, something when I look back at movies from that era, something that is starting to, you know, some things that I've started to notice now as an adult growing up in like this day and age is just how cringeworthy some of the stuff that was shown in the movies were. And we just consumed it with absolutely no
Or judgment
questions
or
or absolutely no
discernment.
thought,
Yeah.
judgment, critical thinking. No, nothing. Like, I think all these ideas are rather new. And oh, one of my favorite YouTube channels, it's called Tried and Refused
Oh yeah, I've
Productions,
seen
guys.
that.
It's
Check it
very
out.
funny. It's by this guy called Jammy Pants 4, I believe. I'm not on Instagram, but that's his Instagram title.
Yeah.
But he does such a good job of like bringing this to light. And I'm like, shoot, you are so right. How did I never notice, the fact that Bollywood movies back
Misogyny.
then did not
Yeah. So
misogyny did
misogynistic.
not have any concept of consent being showcased or portrayed in the movies at all. And I think consent is still a
Novel
rather new like
concept.
topic that we're talking about even in our society right now. But do those movies like grossly violate the whole idea of consent? There's like kissing without consent, touching without consent, spanking asses. I recently saw this movie Judwa, the old Judwa with like
Salman Khan.
Salman Khan, and the new one was redone by Varun Dhawan, I
Terrible.
believe. And they're just like spanking asses and showing it as a normal OCD thing to do, and it's okay, it's justified because he doesn't have control over it. I'm like,
Yeah,
what?
see, and
No,
again,
like
what you said
therapy.
about normalizing is the key there, right? Like the problem is normalizing such problematic behavior. Like that's the real issue. Calling it out point blank. No one did that. Like, and the fact that you can get away with such bad behavior, like that was what.
I guess no one did that because no one thought it was wrong. Like 10, 20 years ago, people didn't think it was wrong.
Yeah,
And that's the issue
yeah.
in a
I
lot of
don't
ways.
entirely agree with that because you know it's wrong, right? I mean, see, part of it is that movies that were made with the, with which showed misogyny, which showed violence against women, the fact that they were all mirroring patriarchy, right? Because in society, it was basically the
And
guys and,
that's
and men who controlled and called the shots, had the power. And when you think about movies, people who are making them, if you're making it from a male gaze and a male perspective, like people who are making the decisions at the top, right? Writers, directors, cameramen, technicians, how do you expect the point of view of a woman at all, right? I mean, who is even asking
that's true.
heroines in that scene where the male star is kind of like being problematic,
That's true.
what she feels, because no one's asking them that. It's all made from the
Yeah.
male gaze.
Yes, and I guess there were very few movies even then, like which were way ahead of its time, and like which were actually a lot of these theater actors who went into mainstream theater, like your Nazaruddin Shah, Shabana Azmi, Nandita Das, like their movies actually were way ahead of the time, got a lot of backlash for the kind of movies that they made, but also very progressive and actually capture
Yeah.
all these ideas.
They were
capture
pushing the
ideas
envelope
such
in
as
those days.
homosexuality. They were definitely, and like such groundbreaking work. But like till date, like but the issue is like we were just teenagers when
Yeah.
we were watching the kind of
Super
mainstream and
impressionable.
consuming a lot of
Perfect
the
time to
mainstream.
watch movies like
Yes,
this.
so impressionable. And we were being told that, oh, it's okay to be
Yeah.
stalked because stalking is like your rite of passage to achieve love, right? And you need to be pursued by this guy before you say yes. Or like the idea that, oh, women are actually victims and you need to wait and wait for a guy, knight in shining armor to come and save you. And it's not
Yeah.
just Bollywood. Some of my favorite Hollywood movies had that
Pretty
idea
Women?
too, like Pretty
Yes.
Women. I swear, like, and it's kind of heartbreaking now in retrospect, with this whole wave of feminism that's come about in society where we're becoming more and more aware, to look back at these movies that we used to like think of so fondly and now like feel like, oh shoot, I see something wrong with it now. Or even DDLJ
It's
too.
like a bubble
Shah Rukh Khan's
burst.
behavior multiple times were like, very
And very
problematic.
creepy,
at
stocky,
multiple-
like cringe-worthy, right? Like the way
Yeah.
he would, like for instance, like okay, let's talk about you're talking about Dil To Pagal Hai, right?
I was talking about Dilwale Dulhania
Oh yeah,
Le
for
Jayenge,
sure. So this
DDLJ.
chick, she's literally sitting in the train, reading her own book, minding her own business.
Yeah.
And like, why the hell?
He's like butting in her business all the
Absolutely.
time, waving her bra in front
Who
of her
does
for
that?
no reason whatsoever.
And that
And
was like
then
charming
this whole
behavior.
idea
That
that-
was supposed to be like, oh, this is how I'm wooing my woman, and charming behavior.
Yes. And then the idea that she goes back to her homeland and then she's waiting for him and like she's crying and she's like, playing the victim. But also, I guess it's not just her playing the victim. Actually, societally, like women did not have that kind of agency and freedom.
For
then.
sure.
And that is what I think was being portrayed also, right? Like they couldn't have the kind of open and honest conversations that we are having with our parents now, and even that is limited and restricted by so much, right? It's still not all the way, but it's becoming a little more like okay to like talk to your parents about your feelings and just it's less about asking elders for permission but like having a little more autonomy over your own life as soon as you become an adult,
Yeah.
18 and over, right? And just this whole idea of love was also so distorted for us by just cinema and the kind of love that was portrayed on television, where women were being, or even in cinema in the big screen, like women were being slapped all the time. That
Just
kind of
aggressive
tells you that,
behavior.
oh, domestic abuse is normal. Like it's not. Like now we're having more open conversations about
It's absolutely not.
and
yeah.
like so yeah, and
Not
at
okay,
home,
guys.
At home, your parents, yeah, not okay. At home, your parents are also like, Indian parents are not the most PDA kind of parents, for sure. I don't know how many of us have ever seen, your parents being affectionate towards each other. It's a
Yeah.
very non-Indian thing. I think we've probably seen that, when we tease our parents a little bit and, nudge them to maybe
Hug
be
or hold
romantic.
hands.
Or hug. Yeah, it's like just hug, give her a hug or give her a kiss. Even on anniversaries, we're like,
Yeah.
Dad, you gotta kiss her, and we gotta like cheer them on, and they'll do this awkward side kiss
Yeah,
or
we did that with
something.
our grandparents too. They're so
Cheek
cute
kiss.
though.
Yeah, they're so cute. Yeah, but I'm saying,
No, but
just
wait, why?
how our whole idea
Oh,
of
okay, yeah, that's true.
intimacy comes more from cinema and not from real life
Absolutely.
examples is also what
Yeah,
I was trying to
that's
get
true.
at. So,
No,
yeah.
and also like this whole thing, what you mentioned about this whole behavior of stalking and how that was normalized in terms of, oh, it's just an expression of love. And, this is what guys do to woo women. And this is what it, like, if a guy is being mean to you and hitting you and it means they like you. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with like people? And you also like mentioned stalking and this whole like mentally unstable behavior, right? I mean, that was pretty much,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Shah Rukh Khan did in Dar, right? I mean, that was like super
Oh, yeah.
creepy.
Or even like Dhanush and
Oh
Ranjana, where
yeah.
he's like, oh, you're not gonna accept my love,
I
I'm
don't
gonna
think I've
cut
seen
my
that
wings or
movie
whatever,
in
quite
its
literally.
entirety. I think I've seen bits and pieces of it because
It's
I
also like a
couldn't.
remake of one of the regional movies. Like, so again, like regional cinema takes this to like just another level. Like every Telugu movie I see, even some of my
I
favorites,
have
okay, which
not
is
seen too many
Pokeri.
Telugu movies. Thank
Yeah, I
God.
guess she hasn't seen as many Telugu movies as I have. Like Pokeri, which is a movie that I absolutely love. It's a Mahesh Babu movie. But even that actually has a lot of problematic behavior where she's always constantly turning to him to like save her, but also in some ways captures like just the society, right? And but not to say that regional cinema is not progressive. There's so
Yeah.
many beautiful gems, like Sakhi, for example. I
Oh
think
yeah,
that
I
does a
think
good
Mani
job
Ratna
of,
movies in general, if you guys are looking for
yeah, in
regional South
general,
Indian cinema, like I would start with a list of Mani Ratna
good movie.
movies because the way he portrays
Definitely.
his characters, both men and women, they all have a lot of agency and they have agency in what they want in life and the decisions that they're making, right? That they're shown for the most part progressively, and especially even women, right? Women usually have more than just, oh, I'm looking pretty on screen. They usually have a career. I mean, especially Sakhi that Aarati mentioned, right? She's a full-fledged doctor. Like she's
Yeah.
actually doing stuff that doctors
Oh,
do
by
in
the
the
way,
movie.
Sakhi was remade in
It's
Hindi as well,
Satya.
but I guess
Yeah.
that's a whole different conversation. Like,
How Bollywood
I feel like a
ruins
lot of these movies in their
regional movies.
original,
Yeah.
absolutely. Dude,
Oh
Sairat,
yeah.
man,
Oh
for
yeah. So
example.
another very
Sairat, what a
prolific
gorgeous movie.
movie industry is the Maharashtra movie industry, right? I mean Marathi movie industry. So Sairat, I think the director is Manjule Rao, if I'm not wrong. So he made Fandry, he made Sairat, and they really talk about like the local issues there, right? The issues of casteism, the issues of how just how prevalent casteism even today in India is, and really pushing the envelope on that, right? Whereas Hindi cinema, I don't think has really dealt with that, except for in Article 15 in a real way.
That's true. I mean, and or it does the remakes and then
Makes
makes
it
it
all
worse.
about,
Like
yeah, like Sairat
loses all
was
the
remade
layers,
into,
loses all the nuances that the original
absolutely.
captures, and then just like makes it like
Yeah,
Bollywood, like
hey, everyone's gonna look pretty and everyone's gonna be dancing.
and then everyone has a big
Oh yeah.
house.
So
Yeah,
Sairat was made into Dhadak.
it's crazy.
Please don't. I mean, please watch Sairat for sure. I don't. I'll let you make your choices
Yeah.
about Dhadak. So yeah, the idea of love. What did like? How do you think Karan Johar movies shaped your idea of love, or like romance?
Um, I want to say that they were, I guess it was very much in line with just the global idea around romance. Like, uh, I absolutely love Elaine de Botton. If any of you are familiar
School
with
of
him, he
Life.
has this YouTube channel called The School of Life.
Love
Exactly.
it.
Just I love consuming like all his work. He's written a book called A Course on Love, and one of his other books is called The Consolations of
Yeah.
Philosophy.
The
But
the
anyway,
YouTube channel
like
School of
Elaine
Life
de
is
Botton.
like free therapy. If you guys don't want to pay for a therapist,
Yeah.
please just watch his videos.
Yes. Just keep just watch his videos and keep like self-diagnosing
100%.
yourself and do what everyone
Yeah.
does with everything. But they're just gorgeous. Anyway, so what he talks about often is also this idea of romanticism and how it spoils the idea of love. Because earlier, marriage was only limited to like unions because of wealth or union because of 2 families merging or taking over names, right? But now it's like with the romanticism, no one really married for love. That's more of a newer age phenomena in the sense that okay, it was like a 19th
Yeah, it's so
century
the
thing, like
romanticism
late
era
1800s,
in art.
Shakespeare, Exactly, or like Heer Ranjha coming, or like Romeo Juliet's, Indian equivalent is Heer Ranjha. So, like this whole idea that you
For
marry
love.
for love was like never a thing, like, or even love, right? Love was something that was outside of a marriage because marriage never represented that. And then they started pushing for love being only on the basis of sorry, or marriage being only on the basis of love, right? And
And you saw that reflected
that
in movies
how
also, right?
that yes, and how that took it to another extreme where you glorify this idea of love, where the movie always ends with the couple actually getting married or like being together, but it never shows what
Happily
love
ever
is in the long
after.
term.
Yeah.
Exactly, happily ever after, but they never tell you like all the other layers and complexes that are within love, within the
The
idea of love,
mundaneness of
right?
daily life
And
after you fall in
exactly, which
love.
is very beautifully, yes, which is very beautifully presented by like pragma, which is a form of Greek love. So the Greeks talked about love as, in different forms. So pragma being this idea of standing together in love and not just like
Oh, I
falling in
love
love.
that.
So falling in love is a
I
beautiful
love that,
thing,
yeah.
right? But standing together in love is what our parents do, or like our grandparents did, like 60
Yeah.
years after marriage. They're still together, they've been through thick and thin, and they're not just calling out, right, out of any situation or an
Yeah.
issue. And like other forms, like ludus being a form of love where it's like very playful and like jolly and like you're teasing each other, and teenage love is like ludus. Then agape is like selfless love, the kind of love that you would feel towards children or old people or someone who's sick, where you're just giving
And guys,
unconditionally, right?
stalking is not
And
selfless love. That's not agape.
yes,
Or creepy
yes,
behavior
not
is
at
not
all.
agape.
Something that is shown on screen is eros, which is passionate love, which is also totally
Lust.
censored out of Indian cinema, as if it's not a natural thing at all. To show people like making love is just a big no-no,
Yeah. I
right?
think
Like
we've
it's
gone
also
to,
something
at
that the
least we've
moment
got to
it
kissing. Like, I think there's a ton of movies that
we've
show
gotten to being
kissing.
okay
Yeah,
with kissing. That's a more recent thing, though. It's
for
so
sure.
recent. What was the very first? I think the very first movie
Raja
that I can think of
Hindustani.
that showed
The
kissing was
crazy
Raja
lip lock
Hindustani. Exactly what I was
in
gonna
The
say.
Rain. Karishma Kapoor
Under the
and Amir
Tree
Khan. Dude, that
and
was
Amir
that
Khan,
was
and
sensational,
that's
and
so
that
way ahead of it.
was super blasphemous in those days.
Yeah,
That's called pushing the
super
envelope, and
blasphemous. Yeah,
trust Amir Khan to do it. I think Shah Rukh Khan still
absolutely.
doesn't
And
kiss on screen,
that's
if I'm not wrong.
no, of course he
Yeah.
doesn't. No, but he still evokes 1,000 emotions
Love, yeah.
even without kissing,
With his like opening
without
his
making any
arms
love.
and being
It's
like, "Hey, I'm here. I've arrived."
yeah. All right, we are giving way too
Okay,
much Shah
that's
Rukh Khan
true.
now on this episode. People, like all the Shah
Haters,
Rukh Khan haters,
Nikhil,
will not
Nikhil
listen
hates
to our
Shah Rukh
episode.
Khan.
Archana's
Okay,
husband.
I think
Yeah,
people
oh
know
my
by
God.
now. We've
So,
referenced him a couple of times. We
yeah.
should have called him on this episode to diss on Shah Rukh Khan. Anyway, we can do that on another episode.
Yeah, every time we say something nice, he
Anyway,
like butt
Bollywood is
in
not
and
a
say,
scene at all,
Shah Rukh Khan
guys.
sucks.
Because I think part of this whole I don't know, I'm too cool for Bollywood thing is also very prevalent in India, by the way, I've noticed. Because some of us, like growing up in the 90s to 2000s, either like they just got woke very early that Bollywood is shit. And those days, they were just like, oh, I'm only going to watch Hollywood movies. I'm only going to watch, like, I don't know, I think it's also a guy thing. No one really, like, guys are not into Bollywood. I know that's a
Yeah,
generalization.
depends on what kind of like. That's definitely a generalization, but also partly true because like I think I remember going to watch like Jab We Met with a bunch of my
Yeah.
guy friends, and they were like miserable throughout the movie, and we were like, "What are you saying? I
Okay.
love this movie."
Another
And then, like,
example, I
they
went
would binge like Gangs of Wasipur, which is
No, but-
also a gorgeous movie, which I absolutely love.
Yeah.
But just like trying to fit the bucket of what it means to be a guy. I love Gangs of Wasipur. I hate Jab We Met.
No, and I
feel
remember
like they do
going
that
with
too.
a bunch of friends to, I mean, we used to have RSI, right? The movie night at RSI. Basically an open air theater where you watch movies in the army. And we all went to watch Devdas. And I remember how miserable all the guys were. They were like, what the hell is happening in this movie? And Devdas is not everyone's cup of tea, which is like this crazy musical saga that Sanjay Leela Bhansali puts on, and all his movies are pretty much like that, right? So that's again like escapism. No one's doing that in real life. Like no one's breaking into 10,000 song and dance sequences, and no one's ever dressed like that when they're like in their house. But But yeah, I guess just coming back to the whole idea of you know
How our idea
love
of love
is
or romance
shaped
is
by the movies.
so
Yeah, jaded,
jaded
right?
by.
And again, I feel like
Yeah.
some movies nowadays are taking on the idea of what really happens after you fall in love or when you get married. And I think Sakhi did a good job of that. Like the
Yeah.
Tamil slash Telugu movie.
To talk about actually the challenges and the adjustments that come after you
Yeah,
actually get married. And
manage two
yeah,
careers, all
someone
of that, right?
so there's a quote by Elaine de Button around, just marriage, and how he talks about like long-term companionship or relationship being uh, not just marrying one person for life, but actually being married and divorced multiple times over a period of time, because you're continuously, but with the same person each time. So because you're continuously like negotiating fights, overcoming challenges in life together, and your relationship is evolving so much through time, as you're
Growing with that
getting to
person,
know the
right?
other person more, going like to the deeper levels of that person. And I guess that's such a beautiful way of looking at this whole idea of love, which is, people say, oh, love is, in movies all you get to see is falling in love for like the
Three-fourths of the
superfluous,
movie.
or like yeah, exactly, it's like just falling in love with a person, not for who they are, but like all the things that you imagine them to be, or actually projecting your idea of the ideal
Partner.
love
Yeah.
on them, right? Yeah, either partner and either person you want to be with on them. Whereas in real life, though, like people, all of us are flawed in ways, and like are, you know, have our own complexes, and really falling in love with someone is actually accepting
Yeah.
all of
And I
that,
think
right?
I
And
think
more.
the new age Bollywood is absolutely reflecting that. And again, for I wouldn't say each and every movie that's produced or released is showing that, but a majority of them, right?
Which movie did you have in mind when you made that statement?
So I want to say, new age movies like, I mean, Kapoor and Sons, I think that showed a really like realistic relationships, how relationships
That's
are in
true.
real life,
That's
right? I
true.
mean, you're not always breaking into a song and dance. There's not like boy meets girl and then that's it, like sparks fly.
Although that movie does have a really good song
Sure, and
also, but
again, let there's
keep it
no way
aside.
to get away from song and dance in Bollywood. I feel like, which is why people kind of force fit it, even in a movie like Gangs of Wasseypur, right? Even if there's a montage of scenes happening, there is a song in the background, and these are blockbuster
That's
songs,
true.
right? People are like chartbuster songs. People are looking primarily,
Like,
they associate movies with song in Bollywood. When you think of
yeah,
like a
unless it's like one of those artsy movies, which are like, the
okay, think
critically
of a movie
acclaimed
which doesn't
movies,
have
which do
song
not.
or background music.
Okay, I'm saying, I'm thinking, I recently watched Gandhi, My
Okay.
Father. Or My Father Gandhi. Didn't have like
Did it
song and
have like
dance,
a
but
very prominent
it was also an
soundtrack?
adaptation of like a theater, like existing book and a movie. It had the most popular like Gandhi's songs,
Okay,
like
so that is song,
Ishwar
100%
and that.
song.
No, but they didn't like
No,
sing
but
it, or
see,
they
that's what
didn't
I'm
like
saying.
dance. It wasn't like
I
Lagan.
guess what
You
I'm
know
saying
what
is
I'm saying?
music and movies are like they go together. It's more so in Bollywood.
Sure, music,
Music and
of course,
song,
because music is what like evokes a lot of the feelings,
emotions.
a lot of whether it be
Yeah.
yeah,
The
and
audience is also
so on and
evolving.
so
Like
forth.
people like you and me, right? We spoke earlier about how our ideas of love were like all about Karan Johar movies and Shah Rukh Khan. But I think you and I have also become more responsible and informed audience because, like growing up, I remember we definitely download torrents, watch like the whole like watch the list of Oscar movies, and that really shaped our life, right? Shaped our idea about
Yeah,
what good
that's
cinema can
true.
be and how it can make you think. I remember particularly The Pianist or like Steven Spielberg movies or Martin
Ooh,
Scorsese.
the
Yeah,
Shawshank
all of those
Redemption.
movies, which it was almost like, wait,
Absolutely.
movies can be like this, like they can be about not a boy and a girl. They can be about like truly talking about historical events or societies and people as a whole versus just a boy meets girl or just a love story, right? And I think that's like big kudos to like the OTT platforms, like over the top platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime, YouTube. They really showcase like the cinematic genius, like, and really feed you compelling content, right? And so Bollywood is expecting is is evolving because we expect better of it, right? Because if you can if you can spend like an hour of your time watching something else on a streaming service versus like the latest Bollywood movie, you're going to do that if it's not serving your sensibilities and your ideologies, or just if it doesn't make you think, right? Entertainment is one thing, but I think film does so much more than that. Like the last thing there, I think, is earlier Bollywood used to be controlled only by like these big producers, film families. Now the whole culture of like the studio culture, right? Like Fox coming in, or Star Studios coming in, or Warner Brothers coming in, that's really changed decisions on what projects are greenlit, right? Because they're more data driven based on the changing tastes of society in India and all over the world, right? So I think Bollywood is absolutely stepping up its game, and which is why we see a lot more movies that you and I are willing to watch, or even Nikhil is willing to watch. He said Article 15 is a very good movie. I'm like, good job. Like, you're watching Bollywood movies now. I'm impressed, right? Because they're serving up the tastes of the current Indian. So yeah, guys, like I think Bollywood and Indians, like that's just the, you know, you can't get away from
Eternal
it. Yeah,
love
it's the
saga.
eternal love saga. And more than any culture, and Bollywood is
Awesome.
so big across the world, right? Like Africa, China, Japan, Europe, Russia. I think it's
It's
huge.
huge. A lot of countries in
Yeah,
Africa, a lot of countries in the
yeah.
Middle East. Like
Even South America,
I've
right? Did you mention
met
people in South America watch
Oh yeah,
Bollywood?
even South America here definitely
I
they do watch Bollywood. I remember taking a bus sometime in Argentina. We were crossing the border to go somewhere. And, like the long bus ride. You know how in India also you have that in intercity
Yeah.
buses. They were playing a
Are you
Bollywood
serious?
movie,
Which
and I
one
was
were they
like,
playing?
"Say what? Bahubali,
Oh,
dude!
yeah,
It's
yeah.
all over the
Bahubali's really
freaking
crossed
world. Like
borders, beyond borders. I
it's
believe it's massive in
it's a
Japan.
big deal in
Yeah.
Japan. Yeah,
Kudos, man.
exactly.
Kudos to and again, Bahubali is
Yeah.
not Bollywood.
India's
It's
soft power.
Tollywood, regional cinema. So
Yes,
proves our point again.
exactly. Power
Yeah, and
of
I think
regional
in
films,
North
man.
America, I think people have started noticing Bollywood because of just our exports like Priyanka Chopra and Aishwarya Rai
Yup.
back in the day, and just people like big celebrities from Bollywood now making a mark in.
And also, like in British cinema, like your 90s
Oh
Gurinder
yeah,
Chadda
Meera
movies that
Nair,
were super
Gurinder
fun.
Chadda.
Meera
I
Nair, they were all
love
like,
those
oh, those
movies.
English book
Yes,
adaptations
the
a lot of the time,
namesake.
like Pride and Prejudice made into Pride and Prejudice, yeah, and so on
And
and
I
so
think
forth.
the other one was
So,
like, I mean, Dev Patel's done very big stuff for India and putting like, I mean, just India in Hollywood, because with
India,
the
yeah,
Slumdog
that's
Millionaire,
true.
he's done like really interesting movies like The Lion,
Lion,
which
yeah.
got like Academy Award nominations and stuff. So yeah, Bollywood's definitely traveling, but I hope like with the new age cinema, it'll travel a lot more, right? And be more known.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that those were our thoughts on Bollywood and Indians. So to wrap it up, any last thoughts,
Yeah.
Aarti?
No, man. I think we're really running over
Yeah,
on this
we're
episode,
at
but this was
50
a fun
minutes. Oh my God. And I think we
conversation.
were like super passionate about it also. You were like jumping off your seat.
We speak for yourself.
Okay.
What?
You were jumping off your seat when you were talking about Shah Rukh Khan and Karan Johar.
Okay, I guess I did overdo the whole Shah
Yeah,
Rukh Khan
guys,
thing a
but you
little
can
bit,
understand
but
because it was a
that's
big part
okay.
of our childhood, like big part of our childhood. I think like yeah,
Yes.
honestly, I will admit it, but it's a guilty pleasure. Sometimes when I'm just like I want to feel good, I'll go back to like let's just watch Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. Although like I'm a more informed, like I'm very judgmental about that movie now, but I'll watch Dil To Pagal Hai, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, Karan Johar, K3G stuff, and TDLJ. But
Feel good about
yeah,
life.
it's I think it's more than the movie. It just takes you back to childhood, which was like stress free and carefree.
I
That's
guess
what it
that's
is.
true.
It's the memory
That's
of who
true.
you were and what life was like when you were back then. You don't have to think about being woke or being an adult.
Escapism
Yeah.
101.
Awesome. So that's a wrap on the episode, guys. I don't think we have anything else to say. We've beaten this to a dead horse. Yeah.
Yes. But we did want to introduce a new section on our podcast starting this episode.
Yes.
It's called MBS, or I don't know if
Yeah,
you're
no, we're
calling
calling
it
it
MBS, but
MBS.
it stands for, it's called Mind, Body, and Soul.
Recommendations.
Okay, and yeah, it's a recommendation session. So section. So basically, we're just gonna share a few recommendations that fall into one of
And
the
that are
other categories. So
enriching our
Archana, what are your
mind, enriching our body, and enriching our soul.
Yup. So what did you
Okay,
have to
so
share?
my recommendation for this week for enriching my mind is I'm currently listening to the audiobook on The Men Who Would Be King. It's a book about Steven Spielberg and his partners who started the company DreamWorks, right? So it's about the media moguls who kind of had this revolution in just how the system worked in Hollywood, and it's just about how they set it up and how they garnered the money and clout to set up really new age cinema. So like some of the biggest movies that they made under DreamWorks was like Saving Private Ryan and Lion King, all of these like really interesting cinema which was going beyond blockbuster. So that's my recommendation on the mind. Body is I want to recommend my favorite YouTube channel for yoga. It's called Boho Beautiful, and I love it. So I try and do yoga every day, and it's their YouTube yoga channel is amazing, and some of their sessions are they play with like forms of yoga plus Pilates, yoga plus something else, and the chick is like hot as hell. So if someone can have her body, like I would want hers. She's really good, so I really like her. And for soul,
Positive body image, but okay.
yeah, positive body image. Yes, that's true. All of us have body image issues, but I mean, it's aspirational, right? For my soul
I guess.
recommendation, I have a something that I'm doing a lot more nowadays is trying to go away from coffee because I love coffee, and I think Aarti mentioned that at some point. I'm trying to reduce coffee and I'm trying to be less addicted to it. So I've started doing a lot of warm water before I sleep with ajwain, saunf, and methi seeds. I just let it soak in like warm water, and I feel like it gives me a lot of joy in my soul. It makes me feel like, oh, just let's unwind for the day and relax and sleep.
Oh, that's
So that's my
sweet.
MBS recommendation.
I do the whole hot water, warm water, and lemon.
Oh yeah,
thing
I do that in the
morning
morning,
instead,
but
yeah,
before sleeping, I try to do this
yeah.
ajwain, saunf, and methi
Lemon and
seeds. I have no idea
That's
what the health
awesome.
benefits are, but I guess it's good for you. Go for your MBS
Like
recommendations
being
now.
responsible.
Do it. Okay, we're gonna
Consumers,
hit
but
an
okay,
hour,
yeah.
so go for it quickly.
Yeah, okay. So my mind recommendation is Vipassana. It's a practice, and it's something that I did just in December. It's a 10-day silent retreat where you spend 10 days without talking or communicating in any form with anyone, and I found that to be incredibly transformational, guys. I'd highly recommend it. The whole idea is mind over body. It stems from like the Buddhist philosophy of meditation, but it is taught in a very non-sectarian way, so people from any religion can really do it. And it's just mindfulness and the kind of clarity that you emerge with at the end of those 10 days, I think is worth doing it for sure. I want to do it once at least every year.
Awesome.
So my body recommendation is yoga with Adrian, and I find it so ironic that two Indian girls are here recommending yoga channels by two white women.
That's so
But-
funny. Actually, I didn't realize that.
But I guess they did do a great job of like popularizing
Yeah.
yoga, and there's also a lot of debate around there about just cultural contextualization of a lot of the stuff that they take. But honestly, I just love Adrian. I'm a huge fan because she is not the kind of person who like pushes you to your limits. She's all about like self acceptance and being kind to oneself. I like Boho Beautiful, the one that Akkar sis also recommended, but I think sometimes she just get like kill
she
you, man.
does.
Like her Pilates stuff is just
Yeah.
mad. I can only do it if
yoga
I'm
with
doing it
Adrian.
with sis.
I'll do yoga with Adrian once
But
in a
by
while.
myself, I
Yeah.
will give up halfway.
Yeah. They're definitely
We are like opposites in
different
that way.
styles, but both are highly recommended.
Complementary, I guess,
Yeah,
in some
yeah.
ways. Yeah, and like my sole recommendation is a quote from a movie that I just watched last night. So I was having a chat with my boss, and like in conversation, he recommended this movie called Adaptation. It is a 2002 Nicolas Cage movie, but there was a quote in the movie that was, I think, just gorgeous in the context in which it was shared, but I think it also just generally applies. And it goes like, "You are what you love, not what loves you." And it is all about this idea of just being yourself completely and not changing yourself for anyone, and also just living out what you truly love and what gives you joy. So as long as you keep doing what you love and chasing your passions, it doesn't matter whether that thing loves you back or not, as long as that thing gives
That's
you joy.
interesting.
So it was just gorgeous, but in the context of the movie, it was just beautifully shown, where this guy actually is in love with this girl, and he's just so like delusional and oblivious of the fact that as soon as he like confesses love to this girl as like a teenager, soon as he is walking away, she's actually making fun of him. And he actually goes like, no, I actually heard her say that, but like just loving her was just it was something that was mine. I loved the feeling of being in love with her. I did not
Oh
care
my god,
whether
this
she
is
loved
giving me
back.
full like Karan Johar feels of like that unrequited love, where in that random movie "Ae Dil Hai Mushkil" he talks about something about the power, like I have the power to love someone and then walk away, some random shit. Anyway, but I think that's where he got the idea from.
But
Yeah, do what you
anyways,
love,
this movie
guys.
was done a lot more subtly
in a
and
more
lot
classy
more,
way.
like, beautifully. Yeah. It was
Okay,
just lovely,
cool.
but
That's awesome.
anyway.
So, yeah, I really like that. I think this decade for me is also going to be about do what you love versus do like follow the herd and just do what everyone's doing. Okay,
Awesome. More power to you on that.
All right, guys. So that was our MBS recommendations and the episode. Please write to us and tell us on social media with comments and or call us or tell us like what do you think about Bollywood and like how it shaped your life growing up, and just is it problematic? Is it not problematic? Are things changing? Please share your views.
Yes, and look forward to seeing you on our next
Absolutely.
episode.
We're hitting an hour. Let's not hit an hour. All right. See you guys. Bye.
Peace out.
Keep listening. Stay curious. Hey Desis, if you enjoyed this episode, then please rate, review, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and wherever else you're listening to podcasts.
Yes, and give us 5 stars now, please. Not the chocolate, I meant the rating.
Aarati, terrible joke. Very, very bad.
Come
You're
on.
horrible at PJs.
You are the queen of PJs. What are you saying?
try.
You're telling me?
No one knows what 5 stars is.
Of course they do.